And since you are a war correspondent, I thought we would talk about war because it is everything in the news today is war. I mean, especially the ones in Ukraine and Gaza. And the Ukraine war, we haven't talked about it in a while, but it's big in the news this week because the Republicans won.
The war in Ukraine has turned into a significant test of U.S. foreign policy, posing the crucial question of how long America should continue to support a conflict that seems to be at a standstill with no clear end in sight in order to preserve democracy and send a strong message against future acts of aggression. However, some fear that the ongoing financial and military support could repeat the costly mistakes of earlier long-lasting conflicts. While Maher expressed concerns about the long-term costs and the feasibility of backing a fight that might not be won, journalists Jane Ferguson and John Avlon stressed the importance of opposing Russian expansion. Real Time with Bill Maher focused on this argument.
Everything in the news today is war. I mean, especially the ones in Ukraine and Gaza. And the Ukraine war, we haven't talked about it in a while, but it's big in the news this week because the Republicans want to link more aid to Ukraine to Biden doing something about the border. Which would not be a bad idea itself. I don't know why they have to be linked, but just to give you some stats. Okay, they've spent $111 billion so far on this war. They want $61 billion more. I think some of that is for Israel as well. Problem is, it's a stalemate. After 2 years, they say the front line has moved less than 500 square miles of territory have changed hands. 150,000 Russian dead, 70,000 Ukrainian dead. We're still having fights over territory and armies, both here and Gaza. So I know the people. I've always tried to be good for the people of Ukraine and back them, and I think it's the right thing, but I also heard a lot. You were in Afghanistan, right? Remember Iraq and both wars. We can still win this thing, but we couldn't in either one.
Bill Maher asserts that while the case for continued U.S. support for Ukraine is morally compelling, it needs to be based on reality. While he likely recognizes the need of stopping Putin's aggression, preserving NATO's reputation, and defending the Western-led world order, Maher has long criticized America's tendency to enter overseas conflicts without a clear goal or a plan for retreat. According to him, the conflict in Ukraine could turn into another lengthy conflict with no end in sight. Maher is still focused on practical outcomes. Given that over $100 billion in aid has already been spent, there have been heavy losses on both sides, and no progress has been made on the battlefield. His primary concerns are the cost and duration. Why does the war remain at a violent stalemate in spite of such enormous spending if the ultimate objectives are to weaken Russia and secure Ukraine's independence? Ma questions whether this conflict is turning into a financial abyss. Additionally, Maher's concerns reflect a broader shift in public sentiment. He acknowledges that many Americans are growing uneasy about significant foreign spending, even while domestic issues like infrastructure, crime, inflation, and healthcare continue to require his attention. More crucial than rejecting America's role in the world is acknowledging the widening gap between Washington's foreign policy objectives and the pressing issues facing many Americans. Maher highlights the changing political landscape, pointing out that Republicans' hesitation to provide Ukraine more aid, particularly on internal matters like border security, calls for a more comprehensive reassessment of national objectives. It's a matter of diminishing rewards, he says. If strategic progress remains elusive, how long can the United States defend its investment in Ukraine when journalists like Jane Ferguson argue that continued support is crucial to preventing larger conflicts and fending off authoritarian aggression? Maher cautions about repeating his previous blunders. He believes that America is once again heading toward a battle with no clear way out, and that the country cannot afford to ignore this fact.
Terrorism wars where America was really sort of fighting shadows. They were chasing terrorists around the world, This is not a Ukrainian fight. This is not sending money just so Ukraine can fight its own war. This is a war against Vladimir Putin and his expansionism into Europe, essentially. I mean, this is a war for global world order. The geopolitical, geostrategic importance of this war is vastly bigger than any of the wars post 9/11, which were overreaches of American foreign policy.
But how long do we just stay in this stalemate? I mean, they thought it was going to be World War III, and it's really World War I.
The reason to fund Ukraine is because we learned the lessons of history, which is that you cannot reward aggression. That's far cheaper to fund Ukraine now than to let.
Although Washington is accustomed to political wrangling, the growing Republican resistance to more help for Ukraine is more than just a matter of political wrangling. It also signifies a worrying shift in America's commitment to democratic principles and its status as a world leader. Critics argue that linking Ukraine money to unimportant local issues like border policy is naive and might potentially ruin significant international links. According to moderate John Avlon, who is known for stressing bipartisan cooperation, supporting Ukraine is about preserving a stable, rules-based international order, not just helping one nation. According to him, this tactic exemplifies unhealthy short-term thinking. He warns that the use of U.S. foreign aid as a political negotiation chip conveys to the world that American commitments are more susceptible to domestic pressures than to strategic goals or conditional or delayed assistance. This sends a dangerous message that the United States may not be a reliable friend when world democracy is under jeopardy, Avlon said. Ferguson, Jane. She offers a deeply human perspective based on her personal experience as a war correspondent. Having seen the consequences of delayed aid, including as a rise in civilian casualties, more destruction, and lost land to Russian forces in Ferguson, she contends that the everyday sacrifices made on the battlefield are minimized when military aid is used as leverage, and that Ukraine's fight is about more than simply securing its own survival. It is also about maintaining the security and stability of Europe as a whole. In order to support this claim, Avlon would probably draw attention to the broader ramifications for U.S. national security. He thinks that retreating now would give the impression that one is weak, which could encourage authoritarian nations like China, especially in its aspirations for Taiwan. Ferguson also cites historical lessons that caution against the dangers of appeasement, pointing to the failure to challenge Hitler at an early age as a potent reminder of the consequences of unbridled aggressiveness. She queries what would prevent Putin from advancing farther, even into nearby nations or even openly opposing NATO in the Baltics, if he is successful in Ukraine. Ferguson and Avlon present compelling arguments against partisan politics, undermining support for an important democratic ally. Supporting Ukraine is about more than just helping a distant country. It's also about defending democracy, maintaining international harmony, and maintaining American leadership in the globe.